Episode 006, Margaret Kimberley. Margaret Kimberley is an author, journalist, and activist. She is the editor and senior columnist of Black Agenda Report, a news and commentary outlet from the Black Left. I followed her work for a little while now, but I realized I don't know all that much about Margaret Kimberley, the person behind the work. In this interview, I get to know her a little bit better. But Margaret is passionate about the issues, so we still have a very topic-heavy conversation. We have a difficult conversation around the Cornel West campaign. Cornel West is someone I have deep admiration and respect for. I think it's safe to say Margaret does too. But the campaign's decision to not seek the Green Party nomination is one I don't understand. We talk about it, as I knew Margaret would have very valuable insight into the topic. Please welcome to the show, Margaret Kimberley. Margaret Kimberley, good to see you again.
Good to be back. It's been a while.
It has been a while since we've collaborated. So let's start with you. I followed you for a long time, but you've always struck me as one of those people that there's not a ton about, or at least that I've been able to find, there's not a ton about the genius behind it all. So I wanted to know, like what kind of got you into journalism? Like kind of start at the beginning for me.
What got me into journalism? Well, I think my this part of my life began. I was like 40 years old, and I always tell people this. It's like, I published a book, but I was 61 when I did, and I didn't start writing until I was 40, so I always tell people this. So when I turned, I was 40 or 41, they stole the election from Al Gore. Mm-hmm. And that was a watershed moment for me in my life, in my political thinking. It's something I was always told in school, it happened once, but it can't happen again. You have to win the popular vote in order to be the president. That'll never happen, that the Electoral College will choose a president. And lo and behold, didn't it happen? Then the Iraq War. So the man who stole the election went to war, invaded another country, and depending on whom you listen to, killed between 500,000 and 1 million people. Those were big turning points in my life. And it was around that time that everybody was blogging. Social media wasn't a thing yet. Everybody was blogging. And I said, well, why don't I blog? I should start writing. And I discovered a website, and I was obsessed. I was online all the time. And I discovered a website called blackcommentator.com. And one of the founders was Glenn Ford. And I wanted to write, I wrote a letter in response to an article. I can't remember what it was about, and it was printed. And I emailed Glenn. I said, can I write something else? He said, what do you want to write about? So he was very encouraging. And so I always say those two things. I began this journey later in life, and I did so because I had encouragement and mentorship. So I started writing for Black Commentator every week, and which is hard to write something every week, but anyway. And for a variety of reasons, we started our own site, Black Agenda Report, in 2006. Glenn Ford, Bruce Dixon, they've both passed away, sadly, at that time. And Black Agenda Report is still around after they've passed. We've had this crazy website issue, blackagendareport.org, temporarily. Anyway, so, but the thing was, after I started writing for Black Agenda Report, I thought I was a leftist. And I was really a Democrat, a liberal, I guess a social democrat, if you will. And Glenn was a Marxist. He was a red diaper baby. And he had been a member of the Black Panther Party as a young man, and Bruce as well. So I was introduced to radical politics. I was introduced to concepts of anti-imperialism and anti-capitalism and socialism. And that was a big turning point for me in growing politically. So that's how I began. I ended up writing a book. I actually prepared. Here's my book, Prejudential, Black America and the Presidents. It's got coffee stains on it. But anyway, Steerforth Press published
that
it.
just means that book was put to good use. That's the most flattering thing a book can have.
Is coffee stains.
I think so.
So I was able to write this book and published in 2020, right before the pandemic shutdowns. And Glenn passed away, Bruce passed away, Glenn passed away. So I and a new team of editors, Dr. Jemima Pierre and Ajamu Baraka, I, do the logistical work, but they are a great editorial team. And again, that mentorship and encouragement has been very important to me. So I don't know if that answers your
No,
question.
it definitely does. But I'm also curious. So what was going on from 0 to 40 for you?
I had this ordinary life. It was funny. I grew up in the suburbs of New York, in New Rochelle, New York, and went to college, came home for a few years, got my first apartment. I worked at an insurance company. Then I worked at the city of New York. But I came from a family where we were encouraged to read a lot, to know what was happening in the world, to read the newspaper every day. So that was always a part of me. And I had, opinions on many things. I wanted to share them with people, but it seemed like a dream, because I had to go to work every day, right? I had to pay the rent. But it was a combination of decisions I made and people I met that brought me to this point. I retired a couple years ago from my last day job, and the timing was perfect. Glenn had passed away, and I'm still very busy, which I love, but I'm busy doing the things that I love. Mm-hmm. And I'm not trying to write a book and go to work every day. I did it. It's one of those things I'm like, how did I do that? But anyway, I managed to now. I don't have to worry about it. So that's where I am now. I'm involved in several groups that are very important to me. The Black Alliance for Peace, the United National Anti-War Coalition, the Green Party. I'm a Green Party member here in New York State. And I think it's very important to have those involvements too. And so I've had some great experience. I've been able to travel to Nicaragua, to Venezuela a few months ago, and broaden my knowledge of the rest of the world, and really come away with this very sharp critique of this country, of its foreign policy, of its domestic policy. And the two are intertwined. You can't talk about just one. The country that spends $800 billion on the military is not going to house people. It's not. They don't care. Or provide free health care or any of those things. And that's something I encourage people. Sometimes it's hard for people to get. And I say, it's not like you have one without the other. And some people are, that was one of my issues with Bernie Sanders. He had he had a pretty good domestic policy. On foreign policy, he sounded like the rest of them. And people think you can bifurcate like that, but you can't. So anyway, so that's what my life was like up until the time I was middle-aged. And here I am now, getting Social Security.
Well, so let's talk about, obviously we are two like-minded people having this discussion, but as if when you're having this discussion with just a regular person, how do you really get them turned on to the anti-war message? Because it seems like it should be such an obvious win, where it's like, yeah, war's terrible, and because we behave like an empire, we are an empire. That's why things are so terrible at home too. like it just seems like a kind of slam dunk, but yet this is just a message that I feel like the masses are not super hip to.
It's hard. It's very hard. When I talk to friends who are less political or I talk to relatives, it's suddenly like, I think everybody lives in a bubble of some kind, right? It could be a political bubble, could be your, demographic group, any number of things. But when I step out of the political bubble and I'm talking to one of my siblings or a friend, so, for example, I had brunch with two of my friends for many years, and one of them said, "Well, what's Hamas anyway? I don't understand what this is." I mean, so I try to, and the other thing is, I'm very self-conscious about coming off as a know-it-all, coming off like I'm lecturing people. So I, just tried to stick with the basics. Hamas is a political party, and they were chosen by the people of Gaza, and Israel should not turn off the water and the electricity people in Gaza, but people, don't think about these things. Or one of my siblings said, Putin, somebody should just kill that guy. He's so terrible. And I just said, I tried to keep it simple again. I said, they need to leave him alone. He's no worse than any American president. He didn't invade Iraq and kill 1 million people. That's for sure. But people, the corporate media propaganda is so all-encompassing. So I don't want to be too critical of people, because unless you make an effort, unless you have this level of interest and really make an effort, you're not going to know this stuff. Sure. So it can be hard, but then again, sometimes you're surprised and you talk to somebody, you don't know what their politics are, and you find out that you're in sync. So it's all that to say, it is difficult. It can be difficult.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times what I try to do, and I probably fail sometimes and succeed others, but I always just try, like, meet people where they're at and just sort of like find something that is on their mind.
Right.
And sort of make the connection that way, and sort of just be like, and it's one of those things, if I ever feel like I'm kind of getting, in know-it-all territory, which I try to really avoid that too. Yeah. I always do give the qualifier where I'm like, hey, look, I've had to pay attention to this stuff for a job, which is true. So you're basically saying like, hey, I have to pay attention to this stuff all the time. Like it's just part of what I do. So that's why I'm spouting all this stuff out. It's not because, it's not because I'm like smart or anything like that. It's just because, well, you were spending 8 hours a day doing whatever your job is. I was spending time reading about this stuff because that's part of what I do. Like that's all. Yeah. But so, well, tell me more about the Black Agenda report. I mean, I know that it's been an outlet for a long time. You gave a little bit of the history there. Talk a little more in depthly about that. What have been some of the trials and tribulations? Where do you see it going, and what has been sort of the key to its success?
Well, blackagendareport.org, as I said, was founded in 2006, and we provide, our tagline is news and analysis from a Black left perspective, and very Black and very left. And our first experiences was the Obama phenomenon. And being leftists, of course, we weren't supportive of Obama or any other Democrat. And we said so. And we took so much heat. The Obama, I don't know if people can remember how powerful that was for so many people, but especially for Black people. It was something Black people always debated. Could a Black person ever become president? Yes or no? And I had concluded yes, but it would be somebody you wouldn't want to be president. And wasn't I right? So that was hard for us, because there were even people who changed their politics over him to be supportive of him. And we did not change our politics for Obama. We were consistent in our anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, our analysis of the African diaspora, Black people all over the world from that point of view. And so it was a difficult time. It was difficult actually for anybody who did not join the Obama train, but especially for Black people. But we did not change. Our politics were the same. And we have always covered issues that nobody else did. So when Obama destroyed Libya, for example, it's Black Agenda Report, a couple other outlets that basically told people how horrible this was, that the United States decided to destroy this state. And the humanitarian crisis goes on now. When you see people crossing the Mediterranean, seek asylum in Europe, if they're from Africa, that's because the Libyan state was destroyed. And but Obama still talks about it. I wrote about that recently. He's like, oh, this humanitarian crisis in the Mediterranean, as if he had nothing to do with it. But Black Agenda Report paid attention to that. We gave attention to Haiti, all of the coups, the occupations, the kidnapping of President Aristide, all of the UN forces who people think are benevolent, but they aren't, and brought cholera to Haiti. This impending occupation now where they've gotten Black countries to take the lead. They've gotten Kenya to take the lead and some Caribbean nations, but it's still a racist project. Talking about mass incarceration, talking about police brutality before anybody else did, talking about the mortgage crisis and the disproportionate impact it had on Black people, talking about Black politics and not Black politicians, but Black politics, a politics that asserts the needs of Black people and the points of view of Black people. And so that's something that we have been consistently doing. Issues may change. This week we devoted most of our issue to Palestine. I wrote about New Jersey Senator Cory Booker, who is a person. Glenn was from New Jersey, and he was on to Cory Booker from the beginning. He was bankrolled by right-wing organizations, by the Manhattan Institute, by these foundations that wanted to get rid of public education. That's how Cory Booker got his political start. And now he's like most members of the Senate, but there was something particularly galling to me. He gave this interview to Chris Hayes. Hamas they're Nazis. They're ISIS. They just hate Jews. They just want to kill the Jews. And then he says, and as a Black man, and he tried to put all Black people into this pro-Zionist screed. And he is who he always was, just a butt kisser who wants a lot of money so he can fulfill I believe he has presidential ambitions.
Oh, yeah. He was part of the 2020 clown car and he'll be back again. I think they're all gearing up for 2028. But
sure, he's young enough, and
we'll be talking more about that. But
he's got lots of rich friends, so he'll be able to do that. So those are some of the examples of the things that Black Agenda Report writes about. There was always a Black radical tradition. That was our tradition. And, if there was nobody else who was anti-war, if there was no one else who would defend Gaddafi, it was Black people, until, of course, you had a Black president who killed him. But so that's the tradition that we are continuing. And so we have original stuff. We have reprints of folks who have our political point of view. And it's very important. And I don't mean to sound self-important, but I think anybody who claims to have radical politics ought to read Black Agenda Report, because I think we're uncompromising, and people get mad at us. Some Black people get mad at us. They're mean at Black Agenda Report. They don't like anybody, meaning the people we're told we ought to like, or we criticize the Congressional Black Caucus, and somebody needs to. So we're very, very proud of our work, and you don't have to be black to read Black Agenda Report.
Yeah, Obama. I mean, in 2008, I supported Kucinich in the primary because, I mean, simply because his politics were just the most aligned with mine. So I supported him. And then Obama, I did vote for Obama. And the reason I did was, I mean, I was a little more, I mean, you know, you're talking about how like I was kind of like still going through the radicalization process, you know, like, so I thought, well, I think Obama is, and a lot of it was his rhetoric, where I truly believed for a long time that, you know, the young Chicago activist was still in there and really did want to actually change things, but was just kind of going about it a practical way. Of course, I was wrong, but you know, I really wanted to believe that. And then, you know, he governed like Reagan for 8 years. And I mean, we all know what happens next. So I mean, but that was a really big, I mean, that's still a place where it's like, I mean, I'll be sitting with, I'll be at a table with friends who deep down were very like-minded. Like when you kind of, you know, cut through the rough of it all, we're like-minded people as far as the type of world we would like to see. But there'll still be those moments where it's like, well, Obama was a great president, right? And then they kind of look at me for confirmation, and I'm just like, we're trying to have a nice time. It's Friday night. I'm a couple of glasses of wine in. Should we go here? I don't think now's the time to go here. I really don't. But
well, you know, it was very heady. I mean, his campaign, it was a thing of beauty, of marketing beauty.
Oh, yeah.
I remember one of the slogans was,
yeah,
it's a movement. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's a political campaign. And he gave the impression that he was a lot more progressive than he really was.
Yes, he did.
And so I'm not mad at people because they supported him, but, you know, it's 15 years later. So I'm hoping that, and although it's still hard, it's like anything else. You know, if you've been fooled, nobody likes to admit that they were fooled, you know, about any number of things, right? So it's hard for people to get away from that. Also, a lot of the Republican opposition to him was very openly racist. I used to joke that Obama paid Rush Limbaugh, you know, and people like him to make racist remarks, because I would see people who were ready to have some critique of Obama, and then some right-winger would call him a liar, or Mitch McConnell would say we're dedicated to keeping him from being reelected or something. And so a lot of that opposition was racist. That helped him politically. So, and then of course he's succeeded by Trump. And oh my God, Trump! I've been saying we need a statute of limitations on talking about Trump. Of course, he has all these charges against him, so he's back in the news. They're never going to
stop. They're never.
But it's like, if you say anything about Biden, what's the first thing? You want Trump?
Yes,
better than
and
Trump.
It's so tired. It's so tired.
And it's often not true. So, you know, he might not lead a mob into the Capitol to keep the Electoral College vote from being authorized, but his policy in Israel is Trump's policy. All his foreign policy is just Trump's policy. Yeah. And that's another thing that they lied to us. Remember, he was first elected. It was
Obama, you mean?
No, I meant Biden. Most progressive president since FDR, and he'll cut child poverty in half. It was all lies.
Well, when people throw slogans like that out, to me, it's just meaningless, because it's like, where were any of these progressive presidents? Who are we stacking them up against? Exactly. Like, and that's why, like, those things, I just don't even give them the time of day. Because it's just like, I mean, if someone's like, well, was Biden the most progressive president of your lifetime, Ron? Like, okay, so you want me to compare Bush the first, Bush the second, Reagan, Trump? You want me to say which one of them, out of all these not progressive at all people, like which one I mean, it's literally like saying, like, just lining up a pile of turds and being like, well, which one is the least? Which one has the least amount of crud in it? Why does it matter? They're all floating turds.
Basically, this turd is a little less stinky than the other one. I mean, that's sort of what it's like. It's
vote for the less stinky one. Be an adult.
Well, and I think we have to talk about the ways in which people in this country are indoctrinated. And we're told our choices are so limited, and we're always told we're encouraged to vote. We're not encouraged to do anything else, though. Right. And they have this whole propaganda campaign where if a Democrat loses, it's your fault. And I'm like, do they ever have responsibility? How do you raise $1 billion, Hillary Clinton, and you couldn't get 75,000 more votes in the right states? That was on her. But it's, it's very powerful, though. So when you're told all you can do is vote, and these progressive presidents, when they do something progressive, it's because the people are demanding it.
They don't have a choice. The spotlight is too on them, and they know I could have consequences if I don't do this, like at the ballot box next time or whatever, or my party could have consequences. That's the only time they do the right thing. And that's very rare. One thing I was going to add to what you just said, though, when you said we're encouraged to vote and do nothing else, I would add to that too. We're not even encouraged to vote the most productive way. Like when people say you got to go vote, they're referring to president, which is by far, I mean, the most effective vote you can cast is in your neighborhood. Exactly. For city council, for mayor. And I'm not saying local politics is without its flaws. Half of it is a bunch of real estate developers. But it's by far where you actually have a chance. There's way more accountability because it's your neighborhood. You really have a chance to truly change something.
But I know people who only vote every 4 years. They only vote for president.
Yeah. And
this New York State legislature in Albany has far more impact on my life.
Mm-hmm.
And the Democrats ignore local politics. They lost 900 seats when Obama was president.
Oh, yeah.
And then so when people talk about Republicans having super majorities in some state and they're doing something evil, my first question is, where were the Democrats? Where were they? I mean, Republicans, I got to give the devil his due. They don't ignore any election.
No.
They ignore nothing.
They also understand the power of ballot measures. They understand the power of initiatives, and they fund. I mean, part of it is they have a ton of money. And by they, I don't even just mean Republicans. I just mean like all the different organizations that fund, your typical Republican causes, the Koch brothers and stuff like that. So they can funnel money into like a random initiative wherever because they just have unlimited dollars to spend. But yeah, like they understand we're gonna sack the city council. We're gonna put all of our developer friends in charge of everything so we can do whatever we want in this city. And I think Democrats. I think Democrats are just basically. I mean, both parties are funded by Wall Street, so they're just basically there to just be a softer version of the other Wall Street funded party. And at the end of the day, the real kind of agenda, which is just a hyper-capitalistic oligarchy, remains more or less the same.
Yes, it does. And the only big differences are so-called cultural issues. And we can see, like with abortion, how little the Democrats really cared. I mean, they ran on abortion for years. It was a vote-getting and a fundraising measure. But one of the things Obama failed to do, he had the majority in Congress. That's how he got Obamacare passed. He could have codified Roe v. Wade. We wouldn't have had to worry about Supreme Court justices. Yeah. But they screwed it up.
Well, and there's so much. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just going to say there's so many other things they could have done with the Supreme Court too.
Oh, yes, they could have. And so, it's even those issues where they have this clear dividing line. We're the ones who have the dividing line. They don't give a shit, really. heck, give a care. What did
No,
Nancy
you can
Pelosi say?
curse. You're fine.
Okay, good. It's
Yeah.
not like the networks.
No.
Nancy Pelosi, what did she say? Oh, abortion's not so important anymore. It wasn't important to her. She didn't
It's a wide
care.
tent. Yeah, they had pro-lifers. The Democratic Party is a wide tent where they have room for pro-lifers. They have room. I think they're going to be making room for Chris Christie soon.
Yeah.
I mean, they're a big wide tent. Unless you're a leftist, they don't have room for you.
No,
they don't
then it's
want
get
leftists.
the hell out.
Yep.
They and that's I want to, when I do talk, we talked about trying to talk to people about politics, and what I try to say to people is, like the Green, I'm a Green. It's like, it's the Greens' fault. Whenever a Democrat loses, it's the Greens' fault. And I say to myself, it sounds to me like Democrats need Green Party voters. What might you do if you needed these votes? What might you do? I don't know. You might find an issue or two that would attract people like that, but that's the last thing they want.
Yeah.
They always hope they can thread that needle and squeak through without doing what most Democrats want them to do. I mean, people want Medicare for all, want some kind of public health care system. And we're always told it can't happen. It's off the table. Biden was clear, I would veto it. People die for lack of health care. But the party that's supposed to be the people's party doesn't take any action, because they'd have to take action against big pharma and insurance and all these corporate people, as you just said, who back them as much as they back Republicans. So, but people are so afraid, and there's so much fear instilled in people that, and people may even complain. I actually encourage people to complain. It's like, and I even say to people, listen, if you want to vote for Biden again, vote for Biden again. But could you at least say to yourself, you know what, this is BS. This isn't what I want. We could have something better. You don't have to go along with the whole charade, but that, then you have cognitive dissonance, and that's very uncomfortable for people. Oh God, what were we talking about? I feel like I went off on a tangent.
No, it's okay. I love it, but yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think most general people, they do want something better. They just don't. It doesn't cross their mind that it's a possibility. And
Yes.
and I think a lot of that, it's not their fault. I mean, it's the way the system's set up. They're in many ways they're not wrong, but it's like, well, if we're not going to fight for a better tomorrow, well, then what's the point? It's like, we got to try. So Cornel West speaks very, very highly of you. You are a Green Party member.
Yep.
Do you agree with Cornel West's recent decision to not seek the Green Party nomination?
I do not. I was very, very disappointed. I thought it could have been huge politically for the country, for the Green Party, for the left in general, for him. But for whatever reason, I get the feeling he hadn't really thought it through, and it was something he wasn't really ready to do. And so I was extremely disappointed. The Democrats, by the way, in New York State, have gotten the Greens off the ballot. We don't have a ballot line anymore. Andrew Cuomo, one of his parting gifts, they raised the threshold for getting nominating petition signatures, and it's this huge number that we can't reach. And absent someone even with a big name person like West, it still would have been hard, but it gave us some possibility. All the issues that the Green Party stands for, that people want and agree with. There was something about having this well-known person that there were people I was surprised who said, I would vote for Cornel West. I was kind of pleasantly surprised. And now we're back to square one. Who would that be? The people whose names have been mentioned are people I don't want. I don't want to spend time talking about people I don't want.
No, sure.
But so we're back to square one. Scrambling, and New York is not alone. Other states have gotten the Greens off the ballot. So trying to the biggest of we say third parties as if there's only three, but the biggest non-duopoly party that had the grassroots support and the ability to get people on the ballot. Now it's like, who's going to run? Who should that be? You know, and I think West, and I appreciate his, he gave me a blurb for my book, which is something everybody wanted, right? Cornel West blurb for your book. And he's a very kind person. He's very generous with his time. I think he's really a grassroots person, and he'll turn up in places you wouldn't expect, the, small, local groups giving support for some issue. And I respect him for that, but I wish he had either thought it through before he did it or had just stayed in and worked, the bumps of something new. And it was new for him. And I suspect that, for a person, he's not a young man, for someone of his age, to have this new experience of a political campaign. I mean, I can't speak for him, but it was personally disappointing. And I think it's a lost opportunity for left politics and for Black politics too.
I agree with everything you just said, but when you say he didn't think it through, like, do you mean running with the Greens, or do you mean running for president in general, or a little bit of both?
I think running in general. I suspect, and I have not talked to him, but I've, heard some things that, you have to have a kind of discipline, and you're the boss, but you also have to listen to other people who've run a campaign before. And I think that was hard for him to do. And it would have meant a lot of travel. It would have meant, so if he said something, tweeted something years ago that's not in keeping with the Green Party, just as an example, now you've got to explain yourself. It's like, well, did you not agree with that then? Or do you know this is not something Greens can go with now? So there were some complications like that. And I think it was something he had not considered. The reality of a presidential or any political campaign is quite different. If you have a campaign manager, the candidate is the boss, but the campaign manager gets to tell you what to, that's part of their job. Do this, don't do that. Talk to this one, don't talk to that one. We need to go here, but not there, and this is why. And I suspect he's a person who's been his own boss, as an academic and an author, and it must have been hard for him to do these things that were very, very different from what he had done before. So
why do you think he decided to run independent as opposed to running as a Green? Like, why do you think he concluded that would be easier?
I hate to say this, but because it's not really a campaign. How's he going to get on the ballot? How are you going to get on the ballot without a party behind you? The only person I can remember was Ross Perot, but he was a billionaire.
Right.
So is this really a campaign? Is it just a write-in thing? What is it now? Does he still want to do this at all? So I don't know if he may have changed his mind and said, I didn't know this is what this was going to be like. And even the Green Party has its rules. He wasn't being handed the nomination. He had to campaign for the nomination. He had to travel around the country and meet people and make the case. I think I can't think of anybody who, absent something unexpected, who would have gotten the Green Party nomination and not him. But I think, once the reality of it, he saw the reality of having this campaign and the kind of work involved. I think that's why he did it. And, so it, what is it to run as an independent if you don't have that apparatus behind you?
No, I mean, I ponder that too. I mean, to me, I did not understand the choice I thought that, and I like Cornel West a lot.
Okay.
I will likely be voting for him. I mean, and I say likely because I don't know who else is going to be there. Like, I don't know what's going to happen next. But I mean, right now, if the election were today, I would vote for Cornel West, whatever was next to his name, because he, in my opinion, is by far the best candidate. But you know, I did not understand the choice for a lot of the reasons you mentioned. I mean, I have very little enthusiasm about the 2024 presidential election because look around. But one little shimmer of hope was that,
Yeah.
and told my best Obama there's a little bit of hope, Margaret. There's some hope, but the one sliver of hope was that maybe Greens would get to 5% with Cornel West, and now that's out the window.
It is out the window, and in New York, whoever the Green Party nominee is, I won't be able to go into a voting booth and vote for that person anyway. It's going to have to be a write-in effort. But I'm writing in somebody. There's no way in hell I would vote for Joe Biden. No way. I didn't vote for him the first time. And becoming a Green was a big deal for me. I was a registered Democrat. I would vote for Greens when I could, when there were Greens on the ballot. But giving up that Democratic registration, New York is one of those states with a closed primary process. You can't vote in a primary unless you belong to that party. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. If you're not a member of a party, how are you choosing the nominee? I sort of get that. But then, of course, there are always these primaries, and there are people I want to win, and now I'm out. And the Greens aren't even on the ballot anymore.
Yeah.
But I wanted to be brave. I wanted to be as brave as I was telling other people to be, and to belong to a party that talked about the things I want. They weren't like liberal on this, but warmongering over here. I couldn't stand by that anymore. I really couldn't. And building the Green parties, it's difficult though. It's difficult. I mean, listen, if it was easy to build a left party, somebody would have done it already, right?
Right.
But I do want to help and build the Green Party in any way that I can. I'm also on the interim steering committee of a group, Green Eco-Socialist Network. Eco-socialism is something people should be talking about. It's something that people can take action on. Having cooperatives, a solidarity economy as it's called, those are things that people are doing and can do more of. So it's, small d democratic activity that can make a difference in people's lives locally. So I'm still committed to that. But this presidential election, I'll be writing in someone. That's for sure. It'll remain to be seen who that will be.
Yeah, it's really, it is something. I mean, and with what you were saying about the primaries, I mean, I live in California, so I'm just no party preference here in California because we have like asterisk open primaries, because basically it's an open primary unless they randomly decide they don't want it to be. Like the party can decide at any point, oh, it's not going to be an open primary, and then it's not.
Oh, yeah.
But I think in principle, like, yeah, it makes sense. If you're not in the party, why should you help decide the nominee? But when you apply it to the United States, it's just not a feasible thing, because we just have a system where there's basically only two parties. And, so what do you think, what needs to happen to really build up the viability of just third parties in general?
I think people have to find a way to break out of indoctrination. First of all, I think people have to realize you are being indoctrinated, and find ways to break out of that, because I think it's the biggest thing that keeps people from in being involved in smaller parties. They're just afraid. I don't want to help, the Republicans win, but it's on them. The other thing about Americans, the difference between Democrats and Republicans are a lot more political. Democrats are less political. So Republicans know they should fight for every seat in every legislature across the country. Democrats sometimes just want to feel good, just want to feel better or something. And so they don't articulate the importance of that political activity. So people who are on the left who vote Democratic, it's sort of by default. They don't demand much. They don't have a really political point of view. The rough and tumble of politics is not really them. So I think Democrats need to become a lot more political, and I think then would be less fearful of straying outside of the fold of the duopoly. And those of us who speak out, we have those uncomfortable moments we talked about, but we've got to plow through it. And, we have to say, this is BS. I mean, Biden, really? He's in Israel now. Israel turned off the electricity and water in Gaza, and I don't care what they say. I believe they bombed that hospital. And he's like, well, we back Israel. And we know they didn't do it. Our intelligence says they didn't do it. I don't believe they looked at a damn thing, to be perfectly honest. But we have to say that's not acceptable. Everything they do is in our name. $4 billion to Israel. I don't know how many billions to Ukraine. And now they've run out of weapons, by the way. So it's kind of funny. Ironic funny, not hilarious funny.
I think everyone knew what you meant, but yeah. In case anyone was confused.
I just think people have to be less fearful, but the indoctrination is so strong.
Yeah.
That that's the hardest thing, that people here are propagandized just to a degree most people don't want to acknowledge. But and sometimes somebody's got to say, well, we're propagandized, and somebody's going to look askance and give you side eye or get mad at you or any number of things. And then you have to reach the point where you say, I don't care. That's how angry I've been about the what Israel is doing in Gaza. It, by definition, collective punishment against a civilian population is a war crime. Period.
Mm-hmm. They never tell you that side of the story. I mean, you don't get that. I think a lot of people, and just regular people, they don't realize that that's what's happening. Yep. They don't realize that it's like, no, they're starving and cutting off supplies and people who had nothing to do with anything. They're just trying to live their lives.
Right.
And half of them are children. What did they do? But a lot of people they have no idea that that's what's happening.
They don't. And I'll tell you why. It's our media.
Yeah.
Who work hand in hand with the state. I saw on Twitter yesterday, Anderson Cooper is in Israel, I think. And he was reporting on the hospital bombing. And he said something about a lot of civilian lives. And then he stops himself and says, a lot of lives lost. And I was like, why would you stop yourself from saying civilians when that's the truth? That's because we've been told that the lives of Palestinians don't matter. They're all guilty. Little kids are guilty. Old ladies are guilty. And if you use the word civilian, you are speaking against U.S. foreign policy. And that's another reason. It's like the corporate media, they just, it's like, you may as well just read a State Department handout as spend any time watching the news, because all they do is
they just read it to you.
Repeat
they
what they say.
They just read you the press release.
And that was it was important to see, but I think those of us who have left politics, we cannot give up. We have to go through those uncomfortable moments with friends and family and find the best way we can. I think it's not hyperbole to say the world's depending on us. It's depending on somebody to say the emperor's not wearing any clothes. He's naked. So that's what I want to end on that upbeat note of what it is that we can do.
So in closing, tell people where they can go to learn more about you, where they can find your book. Just plug away.
Sure. My book, Presidential, Black America and the Presidents, you can get from Steerforth Press. You can get it directly from Steerforth Press or from Barnes & Noble or that big book site that starts with the letter A. You can get it from any one of those places. Also on Audible, and also part of the place that starts with the letter A. blackagendareport.org for now. Publish every Wednesday. And I'm on Twitter, Freedom Ride blog. I'm also on Blue Sky now. Margaret Kimberley on Blue Sky.
Margaret, thanks so much for doing this. Always great to talk to you.
Thank you so much. It's been great. Thanks for having me.
All right, that was Margaret Kimberley. Be sure to check out her work at blackagendareport.org. Again, that's blackagendareport.org. Shout out to Andrew Saxena on the ones and twos. Andrew does the music for the 1000 podcast, and you can check out his podcast, the Baywatching Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. I said the word podcast a lot in that sentence, didn't I? Please, by the way, leave us a 5-star review. And if you would like to support this show on the sustainability end, please do so over at patreon.com/romplacone. For a give what you can level, you get all kinds of exclusive content. You get to see some of my films before they're released to the public. And I'll make you a theme song. And we're going to have a bonus podcast around the behind the scenes of the 1000 podcast. And that's going to feature Andrew and myself. So I'm really looking forward to that. Again, that's patreon.com/romplacone. All right, that was number 6. We have 994 more to go. I got to be honest, it's already going fast. I feel like we're only on week 2, but we're 3 times that, basically. So it's going fast. It's going to be here before we know it. See you next week. Hey guys, Ron Placone here. Take your own 1000 challenge. No, you don't need to interview 1,000 people, although if you want to do that, go for it. Your 1000 challenge can be whatever you want. Maybe you want to call a friend out of the blue once a week. Maybe you want to read a book every month. Maybe you want to start a different garden every season. I guess that might be dependent on where you live. Look, the point of the challenge is taking on an endeavor that enriches your life in some way, and it can be measured. And then, of course, you do it regularly. That's what 1000 is doing for me, and hopefully for you too. The main reason for this podcast and every podcast I've ever done is to build community. So take your own challenge. Then join our Facebook group. It's called 1000 What's Your Challenge? ? That's 1000 What's Your Challenge ? And post about what your 1000 challenge is and the progress you're making. All I ask is that people be encouraging of each other's challenges. This is personal and vulnerable, so be cool. There's enough negativity on social media. We don't need to add to it. For those of you who aren't on Facebook, hopefully in the future we'll be expanding to places like Discord, Reddit, but for now, we're starting on Facebook. And again, that Facebook group is called 1000 What's Your Challenge? See you there.